At the time of recording this video, the DLC is closing in on 24 hours away, and in the spirit of its release, I wanted to drop a completely unhinged DLC theory with a bit of evidence to back it up. Prior to Marika and the Greater Will, all the gods and their people used to coexist in the lands between. It is a bit of a wild theory, due to the lack of information we have about many of these groups, but I think the DLC will show us more to support this claim. One thing that started this theory is that it seems that there's a lot of overlap between the past ages, and it seems that there's still remnants existing within the age of the Erdtree that links back to these past ages, even though many of them are considered ancient. The dragons existed recently enough that they've attacked Landel, and still live in the present day in the form of Landsacks and Fortisacks. In addition to this, we find the scattered remains of Farum Azula throughout the lands between, meaning that their downfall must not be as ancient as we're led to believe. Even the primordial crucible still creates life in the form of Omen and Misbegotten. The astrologers exist as the Carians and the Academy. The fire giants were all but wiped out by Marika. The god of Rot was sealed away by the Blue Dancer during Marika's rule. The Formless Mother's influence lives within Mohg, and her followers still live within Mohg's domain. Death's existence can be found within the Deathbirds and the death root that affects Godwyn, and we still find the remnants of Elden John, who we have very little information about, but his ruins still remain in and below Liurnia. If all of these ages were long past and of separate, distant time periods, why do they all exist, and are widely scattered through the lands between? This is because the lands between once existed as a form of Tower of Babel, a place where all civilizations, races, beliefs, and cultures coexisted. If you aren't familiar with the Tower of Babel story, it's a story from the Bible that depicts a structure that housed a collection of civilizations that were all completely united. Following the flood, citizens of the world got together and built the Tower of Babel to avoid their destruction in the event of a second flood. God did not like this, seeing it as blasphemous to avoid God's will. Therefore, God destroyed the tower and separated everyone by language to stop them from collaborating. It seems very similar to the situation we find in Elden Ring, where we have evidence of collaboration throughout the world, with the astrologers and giants creating the divine towers, the dragons and giants having some collaboration on the creation of the forge, the omen and giants seemingly having some relation through the wicker men, death and the crucible connecting on the rebirth of life, death also seeming to have some connection with the giants as well, with the Helfen Steeple Grace appearing in the Forbidden Lands, and some form of connection between Elden John, the astrologers, and the Formless Mother. We hear a lot about the Crucible, and it's referred to in many ways, most of those being the primordial form of the Erdtree. Considering this, we can look at the roots of the Erdtree that we find scattered through the lands between, particularly below the ground, and throughout Landel. All of these roots are real wood, while the Erdtree is some form of golden illusion, it seems. This leads me to believe that the Erdtree grew over top of, or took over, the Crucible, or the Great Tree, as we hear it referred to in many item descriptions and in NPC dialogue. I don't believe they're different trees, but that the Erdtree is covering the Crucible or the Great Tree. The Crucible is said to have been where life first grew, and I believe the Erdtree draws on that power, which is why Omen and Misbegotten continue being born after the beginning of the age of the Erdtree. The Crucible's power still has influence over life in the lands between. Building on this, we see a wide variety of beings throughout the lands between. Dragons, giants, trolls, beastmen, omen, dogs, mushrooms, birds, and many more. This is because each god was capable of utilizing the Crucible to create their ideal being as it pertains to that god's responsibility. On that note, the gods of Elden Ring seem to be very similar to Norse gods, with their power having some responsibility within the world. We see the storm being responsible for time, death, rot and decay, the moon and the stars controlling fate, the greater will being that of order, the frenzied flame of chaos, and the sun being related to the crucible and life. Each of the gods had their own Elden Lord, We have one example in Placidusax, being the Lord of the Storm God, and there may have been many others that were killed by Marika in her ascent to power. Placidusax just happened to be the only one left alive because she could not reach him beyond time. This is shown when we look at the beings related to each god. They seem to have been created in a way that benefits their ability to carry out their god's responsibility. The dragons have stone scales, making them immortal and able to watch over time endlessly. The death birds, capable of wielding ghost flame. The giants controlling and tending to the flame of ruin. The astrologers capable of reading and understanding the fates written in the stars. And the mushroom lords, capable of processing the rot and decay that precedes death. However, the Greater Will, being the god of order, saw the creation and collaboration of such vastly different beings to be in opposition of order itself, leading to the creation of the Numen, long-lived divine beings with immense power, designed by the Greater Will to be the embodiment and ruler over order in the lands between. The Numen appeared in the lands between alongside the first Empyrean of the Greater Will, the Glomide Queen. Given the power of order in the form of the Elden Ring by the Greater Will, the Glomide Queen was tasked with the death and genocide of the inhabitants of the lands between, the Godskins' tools to be used in this task. Yet, she chose not to fulfill her task, instead creating the Eternal Cities, along with her fellow Numen, and deciding to live among the other inhabitants of the lands between, instead of destroying them, leading to the banishment of the Numen underground. Enter Marika, a member of the Numen who lusts for power. Seduced by the power offered by the Greater Will, Marika betrays the Glomide Queen, having Malekith defeat her, and Marika removing death from the Elden Ring. But the Greater Will would not have their plans put at risk again, instead requiring Marika to summon the Elden Beast to house the Elden Ring, and taking on the Greater Will in the form of Radagon, to ensure that they have control over Marika in some way. In the DLC, I believe we will find further evidence that each of the past cultures existed together in a harmonious world before it was torn apart by Marika's unending war. Until then, we will all wait in anticipation for what will be the greatest DLC in gaming history. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I also hope you enjoyed the DLC. See you in the next one.